The Life Coaching Toolbox Podcast is brought to you by Joeel and Natalie Rivera of Transformation Academy. In this episode, Natalie talks about the life movie activity to rewrite your life story. This episode is one of 9 episodes in a series about coaching your clients to rewrite their life story and empower their personal narrative.
I'm going to go over how to identify your story by looking at it as if it is a movie script. That truly is the best way to identify your story. Your life story is the narrative you tell yourself and others about what happened in your life, what that means, and who you are as a result. While your life movie is the vision you see of yourself, often in your own mind, and it's made up of the memories that you have of your life. So it's a little bit more vivid, more real than simply telling a story. Your life movie follows a similar structure to a real movie. It has a plot with a background story, climactic scenes, and a main character. So we're going to get into an activity that you can download the activity sheet or the worksheet and walk yourself through writing down your life story. This activity is designed to help you put it onto paper in a way that summarizes the story that you tell and is also based off your own personal experience of how you literally see yourself in the story of your life. So there's 2 important things to know about your movie. The first is that you are constantly, actively writing and directing your film. And the second is that your movie becomes your life. So I'm going to go over what is in this activity. But in order to get anything out of it, you really need to print it out and work through it. So I'm going to describe to you what to expect and how the activity works, and then you can take the activity and sit down and do the process. So all stories have a beginning, and that's exactly where you're going to start. Your story begins just like any other, with a background story, a foundation of who you are, where you came from, and what was happening. You can start your story as early as you want. It can start at birth, or it can start at some point in your childhood. So the questions are, what are those defining characteristics of the beginning of your main character's story? So where were you born? What situations were your parents in? What was your cultural background? You can include as much or as little of this as you'd like. And then you're going to be looking at defining the characteristics of the main character's personality and behaviors, because you are the star of your show. So we want you to put a lot of detail into this part. You're going to be looking at what roles your character plays. So just like in a movie, a role is like a character that your character is playing. So for instance, you might be a parent, but you're also a child, a friend, probably either an employee or a manager or maybe a business owner. And these are all roles that you play in your movie. You could also have roles such as being a helper or a teacher. So for these roles, you have a script that you tend to follow. It's almost like you're acting it out based on how you believe that those roles are supposed to be played. So in the activity, we're asking you to make a list of the roles that you play in life. And then ask yourself, how do you believe you're supposed to play that role? Where did you learn it? And who did you see playing it? So the next section of developing your plot is called the rising action. And so what that really means is, what are the important scenes? So in a short story or a movie, there's always a series of important scenes that they refer to as the rising action. And this is where the character faces conflict and problems and excitement. And so in this activity, you're going to be determining 2 types of rising action scenes, those that repeat and those that are important. So first, look at the important scenes. These are experiences that have defined your story. They might have been pivotal moments, or maybe they were plot twists. And keep in mind here, there is another section that I'm going to talk about in a moment about climactic scenes And so it's okay if you list your climactic scenes in both places, but you also can save the most important and climactic ones for the next section. So just keep that in mind. The second type of scene is repeated scenes. And so these are scenes that you might replay in your mind over and over again. They could be those memories that you're always thinking about, that you're always bringing back to life. And so that's one way to look at repeated scenes. And another way to look at it is, do you have experiences or patterns that tend to repeat over and over and over again in your life? So this isn't just something you're remembering. It actually continues to happen. So this is another type of repeated scene to look out for and write down. So as I mentioned, the next section of your story is the climax. Now, all stories have a climax, a point in the story in which the main character faces their darkest moment or their worst challenge or has their biggest breakthrough. It's a turning point. And in your life movie, you might have had multiple climactic scenes. It can go beyond just simply an important scene to one that was truly life-changing. So the question is, what were those climactic moments in your life? Now remember, you can have more than one, but this is where you would want to write these down because these are often good sources of information for what story you actually tell yourself in everyday life and where some of your identity might have come from. So after considering that, the next thing to look at is your current story. So in a movie or a story, usually after the climax, the character finds themselves resolving the conflicts or making decisions or the crisis ends. They call it falling action or winding down. But in your life, you might not have had the experience of receiving that sort of resolution. You might not have even had a clear identifiable climax. So it's okay if your life didn't actually play out like a real movie, because most people's don't fit this model exactly. However, if that's the case and you haven't had conflict resolution, then simply focus on your current life story. So ask yourself, where are you now? What scenes are happening right now in your present life experience? Who's in your scenes? How are things going? This is where you would put down your current life experience. And then, of course, all stories have an ending. However, we're not asking you to tie up loose ends and make sure that final resolutions are made because, of course, you're still alive. This is not the end of the story, and that's really good news. What we're asking you to do in this section is to think about the end of your story as if it's a to be continued. And so what you're doing is you're writing the preview of what is to come in the next part of the film. So take a moment and ask yourself, not how does the story end, but instead, this is how the story continues. So after looking at all of that, we're going to ask you to determine what is the overall plot. If you had to summarize your movie, is it a comedy, a tragedy, a suspense film, a drama? And how did the life experiences that were important impact or change the main character? Is your story one of bravery and perseverance leading you to your current state of success and fulfillment? Or is it one of being the victim of an unfortunate life in which you had bad luck, got the short end of the stick, or were mistreated by others? Or is your story one of boredom and lack of fulfillment, letting fear of other people's judgments keep you from living the life of your dreams? So now that you've written down the different parts of the plot of your story, there's a couple things to consider about your life movie. The first one is that you are the one who both writes your screenplay and directs every scene. This includes the scenes from your past. So you might wonder, how did I write the script for the ways that I was mistreated as a child or for the unfortunate circumstances that happened to me as an adult? I didn't have control over them. I certainly would not have chosen them. And you'd be absolutely right. But what is important for you to know is that the past happened, yes, but it's over. It no longer exists. The movie scenes you play in your mind are simply memory traces in your brain. And the story you tell about your past are just stories. And for this reason, you are 100% responsible for your movie. So the second thing to consider is that your movie and your story create the life you live, not the other way around. What you experienced didn't create your story, you do. Your life experience may have been what inspired the story that you tell, but it cannot impact your future unless you continue to tell the same story. If you tell yourself or others that you are a certain way, then you will act accordingly. If you tell yourself or others that certain things are going to happen to you, they will. There may have been things that happened in the past that you have included in your story, but what you tell going forward is what's going to determine how your story will continue to unfold. So to end the activity, there's just a few more questions to put everything in perspective. The first one is, who else do you let write scenes in your script? Is your story the one you want to be telling? And if not, what would you change? And can you see any ways that telling your story as it is now limits you?
Visit transformationacademy.com/toolbox to download free life coaching worksheets that go with the activities discussed in this podcast, plus other resources for creating a thriving life coaching business.